Good morning, everybody. Welcome to When Did I Go From Miss to Ma'am? We appreciate you all joining us today. As Kristen said, my name's Arlene Schiff. I'm a nurse. I'm an education specialist with Elderwerks. Been in the healthcare field my entire career and working with seniors and their families and guiding them through their aging and dementia journey for over 20 years. As Kristen said, we're going to get started. Feel free to type in any questions that you may have, any comments. Always nice to hear your comments and share them with the group. So the title of this came from a real moment of realization that really society sees us differently as we age. So for me, it happened in the grocery store. Somebody said, "Have a great day, ma'am." And that word hits you. And it made me wonder, when did I go from miss to ma'am? And now when I'm called miss, that's is it a condescending term? What is someone trying to be really nice? So it just makes you think a little bit. But imagine when somebody addresses you as miss, what do you think of? You think of a young woman. And now when you think of ma'am, it probably brings to mind an older woman. And then when we start to think about sir or mister, those terms don't seem to carry the same age-based mentality. And, according to the dictionary, all these titles are technically age neutral, but society really doesn't treat them that way. In reality, ma'am has become, it's a kind of verbal turning point for many women. They start feeling seen as older, sometimes even invisible or even patronized. So I'm going to throw that out to you. What does miss mean? And what does Mr. mean? Or doesn't it mean? In our culture, women experience ageism earlier and really more sharply than men. We know men, when they turn gray, they're called distinguished. As women age, we try to hide it. But being gender neutral, when you think of birthday cards or party gags, women become, old hags or adorable, or when people are referred to, when you're talking about someone's grandma or grandpa, oh, they're so cute. But that changes the connotation. And this is what we call, especially when we're talking about how it affects women, gendered ageism. And that's really the intersection of sexism and ageism. And it affects women's confidence, their careers, healthcare, and visibility in very powerful ways. And now I also want to be very clear, this presentation isn't about sexism or gender bias, but it is about ageism. And while we've seen that women often face ageism earlier and more harshly due to our standards in society because of often types of our appearance, men do face it too, but in different forms, whether it's being called a grumpy old man or, oh, you're too old to change. Ageism affects people of all genders. So today we're focusing on age and how that becomes a barrier, as well as how we can change that. So let's talk about what our objectives are today. We're going to define ageism, talk about where it shows up, discuss examples of what we've all seen. We'll look at how it affects our lives, how it affects our health, our work, our relationships. Then we'll learn how to fight back positively and powerfully. It's my goal to educate, empower, and even have a little fun and laugh as we're exploring ageism together. So if you're Certainly my age, you'll recognize this man. That's Bob Hope. And here's a quote of, I don't feel old. I don't feel anything until noon, and then it's time for my nap. So we know aging has its quirks, but sometimes society defines it and with limitations. So let's take a look at that. So, what is ageism? Ageism is how we think. So, it's a stereotype. It's also how we feel, and that's our prejudices. And that's also how we act, and that turns into discrimination towards others or ourselves based on age. It can be harmful for our health and our well being. Ageism does include stereotypes. It is how we think, and that prejudice comes in, and that discrimination, and often targeted at older people, but it also can affect any age group. It can be overt, like a denial of services, or it can be subtle, like using infantile language. The term ageism was coined by an American gerontologist, and he was the first director of the National Institute on Aging in the United States by the name of Robert Butler. And he coined the phrase in 1969. And we know while ageism has existed across centuries and countries and contexts and cultures, the concept itself is relatively new and really doesn't really exist just yet in every language. And that's why sometimes it can make it challenging to raise awareness globally about this social phenomenon and also difficult to advocate for change. The UN Global Report on Ageism shows that ageism does have serious consequences for our physical and mental health. It impacts negatively on our social well being. It also takes a heavy economic toll on individuals and society. So, to stop the damage, they say urgent action is needed to address ageism all around the world. So ageism really is much more common and more harmful than many realize, and it's more common than sexism. More than 80% of older adults commonly experience at least one form of aging in their day-to-day lives, not in their life, in their day-to-day lives. About 93% of people ages 50 through 80 receive microaggressions about their age. Ageism is associated with a reduced life expectancy of 7.5 years. Um, we can see that 45% of ageism is in interpersonal reactions, 36% are internalized, and 65%, again, exposure to ageist messages. We know that ageism is estimated to cost billions annually in the US due to discrimination and unnecessary health costs. The thing about ageism is it's pervasive. One researcher stated, if you go by a greeting card, they are often incredibly ageist. They may simply imply that if you're over 65, you're physically declining. And in reality, only 2.5% of older adults reside in nursing homes. So let's try something. Raise your hand, and I know we can't see everybody, but raise your hand if you've ever been called young lady or sir in a tone that made you feel ancient. Or if someone said you were too old to do something, or worse, slow down their voice just because of how you look. These aren't small slights, they add up. And today we're going to talk about how these subtle forms of ageism really can affect our confidence, our health, and our place in society. Personal story, I recently broke my wrist and had surgery and had to go see the doctor a couple of times. And in the meantime, I had to go to the ER. I had a little infection. And he walked into the exam room while I was sitting there, and he came in with a tone and a look on his face, and he said, "Oh, how's my little patient today?" And it went on from that. And truly, that was the first time in healthcare that I felt the effect of ageism. did not appreciate the tone of voice and his facial expression. And I just felt like he was talking down to me, knowing that I'm a nurse, I'm experienced, and I give presentations on it. So let's take a look at more about ageism. We know that it's everywhere. Globally, 1 in 2 people are ageist against older people. Think about that. And we know ageism affects us throughout our life. It exists in institutions, our relationships, it exists in ourselves as well. And we know that ageism exacerbates other disadvantage. There's there's 3 different types of ageism. We've learned that ageism refers to the stereotypes of how we think and how we feel and discrimination. Ageism, again, shows up in 3 different ways. The first is institutional ageism. It's baked into our laws and our practices, policies that may limit treatment options or force retirement based on age, even when a person is still capable. These rules aren't always intentional, but they do lead to really unequal outcomes. We may see things like mandatory retirement, age-based limits in healthcare, or a hiring bias. We also see interpersonal ageism. It's how people treat each other, like ignoring your opinion or using patronized speech or just making the assumption that you're forgetful or being talked down to or using the language that they're calling you sweetie or honey. Then there's also self-directed ageism, and it happens when we start to believe these stereotypes. We may hesitate to try something new because we think, nah, we're a little too old to be doing that. But these are really just myths that we've been taught, not facts. There's things that we tell ourselves, I'm too old to learn, or it's too late for me. But we need to know that it's not. Ageism really undermines the human rights of individuals and impacts their dignity and access to services. So let's take a look at its impact. Daily examples. Again, if you've been called young lady or sir in a tone that made you feel ancient. If you've heard, oh, your grandpa is so cute. This room that we're in is proof that many of us have felt that sting of age-based assumptions, and that's exactly what we're talking about today. Have any of your kids said, "Don't worry about the technology, I'll do it"? Or I know that my kids have taken my phone out of my hand because I'm not reacting quick enough or finding an answer on Google that they think that they can find faster. So again, I think we've all experienced it. If you haven't, you're pretty lucky. We feel ageism in the healthcare arena. Age should never determine the quality of care that you receive, but we find that older adults are often excluded from treatments and clinical trials. Sometimes you may find that doctors will dismiss your symptoms or assume that your decline is quote unquote just aging. And these assumptions can often lead to misdiagnoses and also worse outcomes. So it's up to each and every one of us to speak up. We deserve respectful, individualized care at any age. And, really one of the most important places where ageism can show up is in that doctor's office. There were studies that showed, really, there was a review of many healthcare studies that shows that age-influenced treatment decisions are made in 85% of the cases, meaning that older patients were more likely to have care withheld, like a ventilator or surgeries, or a test or even dialysis, even when they might benefit. And that's just because of their age. Another study showed that older adults are routinely excluded from clinical trials and even for illnesses that mostly affect older people, like heart disease or cancer. So that means that many treatments aren't tested on the people that are most likely to need them. We see also in mental health that some therapists just assume that older adults won't benefit from therapy or that depression is just a part of aging, which is absolutely not true. And because of the result of all this, which could be potential misdiagnoses or untreated symptoms or avoidable hospitalizations, increased stress. Ageism in healthcare costs the United States over $63 billion a year. So the lesson to this is that's why self-advocacy matters. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to request a second opinion. Make sure your care reflects who you are, not how old you are. We talk about ageism in the workplace. It doesn't just show up in comments, it affects hiring and promotion and financial stability. Often professionals face invisible barriers, even with experience and qualifications. And our study showed that it's not about ability, it's about perception, and that needs to change. Ageism in the workplace isn't just about offhanded comments. It really affects who gets hired, who gets promoted, who gets pushed out. 78% of older workers have experienced or witnessed age discrimination. It can show up in a job interview with a phrase like, "You're really overqualified," which that's a nicer way of saying, "You're a little too old for this position." We know there are companies who have gone as far as laying off thousands of older employees to appear more trendy, even stating that they wanted to attract more millennials. We know in Silicon Valley, the average tech worker is 38 years old. Older applicants, especially women, are far less likely to get callbacks, even with equal qualifications. In 2019, Google settled a lawsuit for $11 million after being accused of rejecting qualified applications of people over 40, instead favoring recent grads. So we know that ageism also impacts promotions, inclusion, training opportunities, and that, it results in lost income, longer job searches. It takes an older worker twice as long to find new employment. But the truth really is, older employees can bring something that's invaluable: their experience, mentorship, reliability, institutional knowledge. So supporting age diversity really does strengthen the entire workplace. From addressing age discrimination and prejudice to breaking barriers around age-based language, this investigation really dove into how companies can support older workers. So let's take a quick look at this.
I think, if a company wants to figure out a way either to get rid of you or not to hire you, they'll do that. And I've even had my staff say things like when they're going through resumes, and they'll come to me and say, "Well, we didn't pick this person because they were older and we don't think they could take us to the next level." And I said, "Well, let's rethink that." Occasionally I'll say something at work and they'll say, "Oh, that's old school." They're not even conscious, I think, about their prejudices and discrimination.
Yeah, and we see it across, right? We see it in just the daily conversation at the office. You're really dating yourself, and then you see it on a job application. Employers putting digital native or high energy instead of the skills that they need for that position.
I think that at times we as a society don't have a deep enough appreciation for experience. There's lots of seasons to life, and as people are living longer with greater health, how do we embrace that as actually human potential that hasn't been unlocked yet?
I think our next step is to prepare the employment situation to accept and nurture and support the older workers so that it can be a real success.
Amen. Let's take a look at ageism in the media. When we turn on the TV, what do we see? Too often we see older adults that are shown as frail or cranky or confused or just used for comic relief. There was a 2021 study by AARP and USC that found that only 15% of TV characters are over 60, even though older adults make up such a large and growing part of our present population. And when we are represented, the roles are often limited or stereotyped. Um, these portrayals really matter because media shapes how others view us as well as how we view ourselves. So if older adults are constantly shown as irrelevant or incapable, it reinforces harmful ageist beliefs. So we need more accurate, more empowering media that shows aging for what it really is. It's full of vitality and complexity and growth. So ageism, we know, it doesn't just affect how others treats us. It also affects how we treat ourselves. There was research from Yale that showed that when people believe aging means decline, they're more likely to experience memory loss, low motivation, and even physical deterioration. And it's just because of those beliefs. And then when the media, portrays people as frail or out of touch or burdensome, that starts making us feel the same way. And the messages, it really influence how we see and treat aging people, including ourselves. As I stated before, that there was a study that showed that people with negative views on aging lived 7.5 years shorter lives than those with a positive outlook. Why is that? Because our mindset really impacts our stress, our health behaviors, and even how well we recover from illness. So the good news is changing how we think about aging can really make a measurable difference. And, encouragement, connection, rejecting ageist stereotypes can really protect both our mental and physical health. It's important to know that a positive mindset isn't just nice to have, it's truly a health strategy. We know that ageism is harmful as well as costly. Again, $63 billion in healthcare costs a year due to ageism. We know about how it affects our life expectancy. It does have a price tag. And when society really underestimates the value of older adults, we not only spend more on avoidable healthcare, but we also miss out on wisdom, mentorship, as well as the labor. So think about the economic contributions that older adults continue to make, whether it's as volunteers, as caregivers, as part-time workers, community leaders. We're not just growing older, we're continuing to grow. Let's take a look at this quick video on how we flip the script.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
I love that. See the whole picture. So we need to know that aging is not the enemy, really, ageism is. Older adults are active in business, they're active in sports, active in education. Aging really can be and should be a time of growth, even reinvention and contribution. Frame it as aging isn't something to battle, it's something to embrace. It brings experience and perspective and emotional intelligence. Ingrid Bergman once said, getting old is like climbing a mountain. You get a little out of breath, but the view is much better. And it's true because we know that the view is beautiful from here. So take a moment, think about a time when you felt underestimated or dismissed simply because of your age. Was it in a conversation, a job interview, a doctor's visit, or maybe just out in public? These experiences are valid. It sharing them helps us see how common and how wrong ageism really is. So please take a moment and type in the chat. What are some times that you felt underestimated due to your age? Again, I feel it all the time with my children, and we joke about it, but I do feel it, and I don't like it. Um, the National Council on Aging states that ageism is our enemy. It impairs our ability to live our best lives, both as individuals and as a society. Young and old alike suffer from stereotypes such as being too young to lead or too old to learn. The reality is that aging is really, it's a dynamic process. And we know that aging leads to new knowledge and abilities. It generates experiences that really inform our decision making. It can expand our networks. It deepens our relationships. Often we've been taught to fear aging or to see it as a decline, but the truth is it brings insight, it brings patience, it brings clarity. We've earned our years. Instead of seeing age as the enemy, let's see it for what it is. It's a badge of strength and a badge of survival. It's time to celebrate positive aging. There are so many stories of people who found their purpose later in life. Pao just saying ran his first marathon after turning 100. Toni Morrison published novels and gave lectures into her 80s. These are examples that show aging isn't the end of accomplishment. It can be the beginning. And we celebrate these trailblazers, and let's remember that every one of us has a story worth telling. You are the role models to your children, to your neighbors, and to your community just by living fully. Remember how important the power of language is. Words are, again, so powerful. Have you ever been told you look great for your age? That's ageism in disguise. Even compliments can carry assumptions instead of, when you say to somebody, are you still working? Instead of saying that, try saying, what are you working on these days? Because language can either limit us or lift us. So let's choose words that respect and empower. Myself as a nurse or as caregivers or peers, we often set the tone for how people view aging because our language reflects our values. So by choosing affirming and respectful words, we not only fight ageism, but we encourage dignity and self-respect. So again, take a look at some of these phrases on the screen. You look great for your age. Instead, say, you look great. Avoid using the words sweetie or honey. That can be it could be abusive at times. It can be just very negative to someone. Instead, use words that are empowering, like capable and active and vibrant, and catch your own self. Instead of saying, I'm too old for that, say, you know what? I'm just getting started. So age doesn't limit you, it equips you. And with every year comes emotional intelligence, resilience, wisdom. We've all faced challenges, navigated losses, we've celebrated wins, and that builds confidence and clarity. As we age, we know our priorities shift. We're not chasing status. We're focusing on relationships. We're focusing on purpose. We're even focusing on what our legacy is. Hopefully, you're more comfortable in your own skin. You're better at spotting what matters, and you're ready to say yes to things that align with your values instead of just saying yes to appease other people. Oftentimes we see that empathy and connection really grow stronger with age, and that can make us a powerful mentor, a powerful friend, and a powerful guide to others. So when someone asks you what you can't do anymore, remind them that you've really never been more equipped to lead and contribute and inspire. And again, remember, strength is in resilience. I've gotten through so much, so I can handle this too. So many negative assumptions about aging we know aren't true, and we're proving the myths wrong every day. We're all living examples that learning and connecting and thriving, they don't go out of style. So when we say, I'm too old for that, we shut ourselves off from new opportunities. Replace that with, I've got the experience to try something new. And, we know old people can't learn technology. That's a myth. We are the fastest growing group of tech users. Old means lonely. Many, many adults have rich, active social lives, and it's important and necessary to have active social lives. You see all the birthday wishes. It's all downhill after 60. But many people say in their 60s, 70s, 80s on up are often their most fulfilling. So aging isn't the end of something. It's just another chapter. So how do we combat ageism? Well, we can. We can address ageism with three different strategies. One is policy and law. Policies and laws, can be used to reduce ageism towards any group. There are policies and legislation that address age discrimination and inequality, as well as human rights. And strengthening these policies and laws can be achieved by adopting new things at the local level, at national level, or international level. But it requires enforcement and monitoring. And again, with that, we can help decrease ageism. We can look at another strategy of educational interventions. This should be included at all levels and types of education, whether it's, grade school or universities, formal and non-formal education, because educational activities can enhance empathy, dispel misconceptions, reduce prejudice and discrimination, and this by providing accurate information and counter stereotypical examples. Then we look at intergenerational interventions. Investment needs to be made in intergenerational contact interventions. These aim to foster interactions between people of different generations. And we know that these contacts reduce prejudices and stereotypes. These are some of the most effective interventions to reduce ageism against older people. And they also show promise for reducing ageism against younger people. So the most powerful way to fight ageism is to start with ourselves. Catch yourself when you say things like, I'm too old for that. We know that's internalized ageism. It shuts doors. So instead, try the statement, I've got the experience to try something new. I'm just getting started. These are affirmations that reframe how we're aging. Go for that intergenerational connection. That's huge. Volunteer, mentor, stay connected. Again, one of the best ways to fight ageism is to bring generations together. And whether it's mentoring or volunteering in schools or just sharing your stories, sharing the education that you have, intergenerational relationships benefit everyone. Young people gain perspective, they gain empathy. Older people will stay connected, valued, and active. When older and young people spend time together, whether through mentoring, volunteering, or storytelling, it definitely breaks down stereotypes. And research shows that programs like this really improve attitudes, create mutual respect. Don't underestimate the media's influence. If you see a show that misrepresents older adults or an ad that potentially misrepresents older adults, say something, write a letter, support programs that portray aging as vibrant and full of value. Join local organizations, AARP. Take a look at the World Health Organization Ageism campaign. There is a whole research program that they've put together that is extremely interesting to take a look at. Read about the National Council on Aging. There's so much information online. Remember, of anything, remember this: aging isn't a decline, it's an evolution. We don't stop growing just because we get older, and every chapter brings new opportunities. Love this, that we don't stop playing because we grow old because we stop playing. So again, aging doesn't mean giving up passions, purpose, or connection. We remain vibrant and loving and worthy at every stage of life. So celebrate what you gain with age: wisdom, clarity, perspective, and embrace the journey of aging with pride. The antidote to ageism is visibility, vitality, refusing to fade into the background. We're still becoming, and we're just getting started. So with that, I thank you. Your experiences and voices matter. Keep sharing them. Keep this conversation going in our homes, our communities, our workplaces. It's up to us, and we can redefine what it means to age. So if you have any questions, please type them in. Please share any, whether it might be fun or insulting aging experiences you may have had. I had a friend, when I told her I was doing this presentation, she said, "When did I become invisible? Now, if I go into a restaurant and sit at the bar, nobody even comes to offer me a drink. They offer it to the younger women down at the other end." So any experiences that you have, please let me know.